into the wilderness of our lives, the uncertainty, the confusion, and the distractions from your word, with a moment of clarity, grace, and understanding that encourages us and molds us through your word and by your spirit and Christ's image. Amen. I'm going to be reading from Matthew chapter 10, verses 5 through 14, and reading from the Message. Jesus sent his 12 harvest hands out with this charge. Don't begin by traveling to some far-off place to convert unbelievers. And don't try to be dramatic by tackling some public enemy. Go to the lost, confused people right here in the neighborhood. Tell them that the kingdom is here. Bring health to the sick, raise the dead, touch the untouchables, kick out the demons. You have been treated generously, so live generously. Don't think you have to put on a fundraising campaign before you start. You don't need a lot of equipment. You are the equipment. And all you need to keep that going is 3 meals a day. Travel light. When you enter a town or village, don't insist on staying in a luxury inn. Get a modest place with some modest people and be content there until you leave. When you knock on a door, be courteous in your greeting. If they welcome you, be gentle in your conversation. If they don't welcome you, quietly withdraw. Don't make a scene. Shrug your shoulders and be on your way. You can be sure that on Judgment Day, they'll be mighty sorry, but it's no concern of yours now. This is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
So this week, I was at our North Carolina United Methodist Annual Conference. The clergy and laity meet every year in an annual conference, and we have 2 annual conferences in North Carolina, Western and then the Eastern Conference, and we're part of the Eastern Annual Conference, and we just had ours. And I took Isaac and Laurel with us, with me, and they had childcare during the day. And so I had a few extra things to bring with me to the hotel room. And so when I picked them up from childcare on the first day, I had my hands full because they can't help me. So I'm like trying to carry all these things, and I have a drink in one hand, bag on this hand, and trying to carry something on my back, and then all the while realizing that my hotel card is in my wallet and my hand. So I'm like, and then this guy comes out on the other side of the other hotel room, and he goes, "You need some help?" And I clearly looked desperate, and I was like, "No." "Nope, I'm good." And then he's like, "Are you sure?" And then the drink falls to the ground and spills all over the hotel car. I was like, "No, I'm good." He's like, "It looks like you need some help." I'm like, "No, I am fine." And I got the door open, and of course, they just go right in, and the door shuts. I'm good. I'm great. I set the things down, and like he's like, "You need me to help you take those in there?" Look, man, I'm good. I thought this is. I just thought this as I was thinking about this sermon this week, and talking about what does it mean to name what we need and to allow people to help us. And then also at the same time, what does it mean when we offer to help others and they help others, or to be to give ourselves to somebody and to also be rejected? Man was offering to help me, and I rejected and said, "I don't need your help," when clearly I needed his help. And so today, that's what I want to talk about. As I've reflected upon these words that I've heard a bunch of times about Jesus sending his disciples out, I thought to myself, this is a story about Jesus sending his disciples to be dependent upon the help and hospitality of others. That they were to be the stranger in the crowd. Because we often talk about what it means for us to welcome others, what it means to be hospitable to others in our life, in our community, in our homes. Because in some ways this is a safer way for us. To welcome someone into my home means I can incorporate them into the rhythms of my life. I am in some sort of control. But to be a stranger in someone else's home is a very vulnerable position to be in. In our gospel reading today, Jesus flips this script and tells his disciples to take nothing with them, to have no prepared place to stay, and to be totally dependent upon the generosity and hospitality of others. And he puts a caveat at the end of this story, is that some people are going to tell you no. Jesus' invitation was to deep vulnerability, which means exposing ourselves in a way that reveals our deep need, and also the vulnerability to fail and to be rejected. There is a discomfort in being the stranger in the crowd. There is a discomfort on being dependent on others and in need. I sometimes in the beginning of our gathering will ask, what do you need? Like, what do you need from this space? Like, you came here today. What do you need to receive? I find this question is really hard for us to name in our lives. What it is we need. So I want to ask you right now, what is it you need? Another cup of coffee right now? But when you come into a space like this, what is it that you are looking for? I know this is a vulnerable question to ask, and I want to invite you to be vulnerable. As I've walked with the vulnerability of this and taking that question to any space that we find ourselves is such a centering question of, like, if we're working with people in our workplaces or in our families or with our kids. This is a constant conversation with our kids. Is like, it's, I want water. You know, it's like, let's reframe that and say what you need with a nice way. But I feel like adults, we tend to be, and especially in our culture, we tend to take that to the place of, I don't want to ask what I need, and that's a very vulnerable question to answer for ourselves. But I think sometimes we'll be surprised at the answer. You know, there are sometimes, like, if somebody was to ask me, you know, what I needed in a moment, sometimes what I need is just an affirming word. Is, you know, say something good about me so I can just, like, lift my head up a little bit. And so I invite us, as we think about asking for what we need and asking one another for what we need, to ask one another that question, and to be prepared for the answer, and to be prepared to help one another. There's something in this that I think there's also a reason why we don't like to ask what we need, is because there's a vulnerability in that, and there's also a vulnerability in being rejected. I go back to my kickball days. I don't know if y'all can remember your kickball days, but I just feel like those were the training grounds for rejection. You might be like, speak for yourself. But I can remember, the PE coach would line up, you line up, and they picked two captains. And for some reason, I just was not captain material. And, at some moments, I'd be picked, first or second. And I'm like, oh, dear God. Because you were picked first or second, that means they have expectations of you. And I usually, the ball would be coming at me, like I could see it, it's coming at me, and like, this is like, oh gosh, like it's back there, and like the person's like running around the bases, and then the next day it's like, all right, line up, and it's like, that guy, yeah, I thought he was good, but he's not, so, I'm like the last picked. And you just feel this sense of rejection. All these narratives take place in your head, like, I'm picked last because I failed, and we have all these narratives of non-self-kindness, of like, I'm a failure, I don't belong, and I'm picked last because I'm not good enough. And so in our lives as a kid, we begin to, we don't ask for what we need, because that's too vulnerable, and we don't want to be rejected. And because we know that in rejection, we begin to ask all these questions about who we are, and we really beat ourselves up. And so what we do in our lives is we don't put ourselves in positions to be rejected. It's like if I'm going to put myself in a position of rejection, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. Because it's too vulnerable of a place. I think about all of us in this room and that are a part of this community. Every one of you, nobody in here we're loosely connected, but we didn't know, none of us have known each other for a very long time. When you walked into this space, you walked into a space where you took the risk of being rejected. Like, it is a courageous step, because you're like, I'm a stranger to this community. They're going to do one of two things for me, is that they're going to reject me or they're going to accept me. And most people will not walk into any space or any church, because I felt rejection once in church, and by God, I'm not going to walk again. I don't care how much every story matters, bull crap. Yeah, give me a break. I'm not going to walk into any space if I might be rejected. And yet, Jesus' first mission for his disciples is to say, I'm going to give you the reality of this mission, is that I'm going to put you in a place to where some people are going to be hospitable to you, and then some people are going to reject you. We can live our lives in a way to where we protect ourselves from harm. It's like, harm me once, you won't harm me again, and I will do anything and everything. We put up these high walls so that we can't build good relationships with people, because we're so fearful that I had a good relationship once and that failed me and I was rejected, and so you think I'm going to have a relationship with you now? Absolutely not. But the thing about experiencing joy, vitality, fruitfulness in our lives is that we have to open ourselves up to the vulnerability of being rejected, to take risks. Rejection is one of those experiences in our lives, and I kind of put failure in there too. It's one of those experiences in our lives of where we need to take care of ourselves the most, is where we take care of ourselves the least. Because when we're rejected, we have these inner voices, and this might just be me, but I have these inner voices like, there you go again. Like, it's happening again. And you begin to say, when you're rejected from something, you begin to say, well, it must be you. And it's like, remember the kickball field? And you have all these, and like as a child, you begin to internalize all these things, and you begin to personalize rejection. But when the reality, when you reframe it as, if you want to be fruitful in your ministry, You have to be willing to put yourself in the place of the stranger and be willing to be rejected. And it's in those moments that you have to learn to be kind to yourself. And the recognition of that to look back on my life is that I personally, and every one of us, have a good rejection story. And guess what? We lived. We're still here. And we have good relationships. And we probably can paint our past in a more beautiful place where we thought that rejection would have the end of us. And it really didn't. That we begin to reframe those moments in our lives. And I think about this space, that there is no faith community, at least that I know, that exists, that doesn't have some sort of no faith community, no family relationship, no friendship, and no job that isn't without some sort of pain, hurt, conflict, critics, and rejection. And that it's our hope that we might work through those and continue to show up in one another's lives. Many of us, and I don't know if this is you or you have this voice, but you have rules in your head, right? You cross this line, I'm out. What if we tell those narratives and say, well, no. Because a lot of times those lines are like, you hurt me, you caused me any pain, I'm out. And maybe that's with the friendship, maybe that's with the family member, maybe that's with the faith community. But maybe we should accept that, you know what? I'm going to work through all these things. That if you hurt me, instead of pulling back, what might it mean to engage and to be honest with one another and to share with one another how we might be feeling? I think about friendships and I think about relationships. Relationships become stronger out of conflict. They become deeper and richer because you work through things. And I think about it the same with friendships and with faith communities. When we go through hard times, we find a sense of togetherness and identity. It's not easy. We are invited into the same journey in this text. A willingness to risk being rejected so that we might have deep communion with others. And it is a huge risk. It is a courageous risk. I've told some of y'all, and I've told this story often about, in my last church, there was a guy named Edward. I was a 2-point, I'll kind of give the brief narrative, but I was served a 2-point charge. Nobody new ever came to this church. Nobody. And everybody always talks about, if you've been in these places, like, I just hope somebody new comes. I just hope somebody new comes. And so finally somebody new came. Edward came in right when the service started. And people just kind of like, if you can imagine people facing the front, turn their head kind of like this, saw him, and then turn back. And they looked at me and were like, I'm like, you do that. I'm like, and we were having all these, and they're like, who is he? What's his address? Anybody got his phone number? Like all these weird things that were happening. And at the end, I'm like, this guy is never coming back. Some people are asking Edward for your social security number. Can we get that before you leave? And then he was like, I want to come to the men's dinner. And I'm like, listen, men's dinner is a very liberal term. Liberal is actually the wrong term. Conservative. But he came and we started having these conversations. And he's asking all these deep questions about who God is, and he wanted to meet with me. And so We scheduled a time to meet, and he came. I had an office in the church parsonage, and came over, sat at the table. He sat down. First thing he said, started crying, "I'm gay." And to me, this demonstrated Edward was a stranger to me, and I was a stranger to him. He had no idea what I was going to say in that moment. He had no idea if I was going to say, "You know what? I'm sorry, but who you are is incongruent, incompatible, whatever the language is." But in that moment, I got to express to him his humanity, how much God loved him and cared about him, and I was a pastor able to say those words to him. But I think about that story in a way that of courage and risk. He had been rejected so many times in his life, yet he came to that table to pour himself out. And I very well could have rejected him, but I didn't. But his risk and courage to get to that table is just such a beautiful expression of what God calls each of us to sometimes put our heart out there and to say what we need from others, and just to let it be out there and to be so faithful to who we are. And if people reject it, they reject it, and they're really missing out on something beautiful. But sometimes people are going to receive it, and it's going to be a beautiful thing. But if we never put ourselves out there, we never get to experience that profound beauty together. And so I want to invite us, one, to put ourselves in the shoes of others that come into this space, and to remember that we were once strangers coming into this space, and to embrace people, all their questions, all their hopes, all their curiosities, and to remember that we were once new to the neighborhood, new to the community, and to give the best hospitality to welcome others. Two, to practice naming what you need, and to practice letting others help you. I've thought about this week, and when you run out of eggs, what about going over to your neighbor's house? I need some eggs. Many of it, I wouldn't do that. Let me be honest. What's that?
I would.
So you need eggs. But learning to name what we need and to ask for help, and let others be hospitable to you. And last, to take the risk, and this is the most vulnerable thing for me, of being rejected, and lean into being vulnerable in hopes that doing so will make this journey beautiful. A journey where we learn to care well for ourselves and embrace holy narratives about our lives, and live in holy expectation of the unexpected hospitality of others.